Today on the Uncomfortable Podcast with Jeffrey Gabriel. If you're interested in building your business on or investing in a .ai domain name, then we've got the episode for you. Join us as we sit down with Vincent Cate, the head of Anguilla Domain Registry, aka .ai Domain Registry. He will share his story, delve into some registry statistics, and address key questions that potential registrants like yourself may have before committing to a .ai domain name. Getting to know Vincent, he has a bachelor's and an MBA in computer science, and he's very interested in financial cryptography, cryptocurrencies, as well as he's extremely forward-thinking and entrepreneurial. I really can't think of a better person to represent this extension, and I think you will feel the same way as well after listening to him. And as always, thanks for listening, and if you have any questions, comments, or would like to be a guest on the show, you can always email us at buzz@saw.com. That's buzz@saw.com. Have a good day. Today on the Uncomfortable Podcast, we have Vincent Cate from the .ai Registry joining us. And to give him a little bit of a background before we begin, he is a software developer based in Anguilla. He graduated from the University of California, Berkeley, and has a master's in computer science from Carnegie Mellon. You had an Atari hardware business in the 1980s. In 1994, moved to Anguilla to pursue many business opportunities like establishing an internet service provider, some people call it an ISP, offshore services Limited, realestate.ai, gold.ai, which pays cash for gold. You launched publicdata.com/AI, where people can look up people's criminal records online. You're also one of the founders of the Financial Cryptography Conference. You're a published author, blogger, and is also a model plane/boat enthusiast. And as I said before, you manage the top level domain extension .ai and have done so since 1994. And I'm guessing that nothing has really changed since 1994 in the last 30 years with the .ai extension. So welcome to the show. How you doing today?
Doing well. So it's pronounced Anguilla. It rhymes with the vanilla.
Anguilla.
Anguilla.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I totally destroyed that like I did your last name on the first
The other
take
thing
there.
is
So
father of 4 boys. You got to mention that too. So
what are their ages?
geez, 15, 17, 20, and 22.
So I didn't really I spent more time looking into your background and things like that. And Anguilla, is that also an English territory or
Yeah.
is its own? Okay. So
If
when your
we
kids go
ever-
to college,
If we ever
Go ahead.
declared our independence, they would respect it, but we haven't tried that yet.
Okay. So it's similar to Cayman where it's in English.
Yeah.
You still have to answer on certain things back to the crown, but
Yeah,
most of it you're on your own.
Yeah.
So with children getting to the college age, are you looking at sending them to England for college or United States? What are you thinking about?
It's not clear yet. They may not go to college. I'm not convinced that college is worth all the time and money, really. They're helping me out with this job and learning stuff on the job, and that might be a better thing. I don't know. We'll see.
I always felt that, and my dad said the same thing to me, and getting older and looking at it is, I always feel like the 4 years that you would go to college, obviously it gives you experience, a lot of life experience, especially if you're living there and meeting people from all over the place. And it's usually your first time living alone. And obviously your parents aren't there. And I think that is more important than the education itself. And then after you graduate, obviously you learn a little bit of things, but I think your college is what opens your first or second door. And then it's really obviously up to the student or now the worker bee to do something with it, and after that, I don't think it matters. I find it bizarre when I speak to people in the business world who say, I can't go any higher at the company I'm at unless I go get a master's or I get a college degree. And it's
No.
like, really? Does it matter at this point? And I also, one of the best developers that worked with me at Uniregistry was a self-taught developer. He never went to school for computer science. And, he built the Uniregistry brokerage all the tech behind it, and so he had every qualification, and or he could probably teach the class better than most professors could. So it's definitely yeah, I agree. So anyways, I'm sure we could talk about that for days. So how about you tell us a little bit about your story that I kind of went over, and how you got yourself involved with the .ai registry.
So I was interested in cryptography and financial cryptography type things way back. I was on the Cypherpunks mailing list in the early '90s, and so I wanted to write software to do some sort of internet payment system. And the
Mhm.
U.S. had these ITAR, International Traffic in Arms Regulations, which made it like my brain was their property, and you weren't allowed to export outside the United States, and that my brain was their territory. So even if I was outside the United States and I wrote software, it was considered exporting it if I wrote the software in Anguilla, right? And so I got rid of my U.S. citizenship. That was early on. Um, and when I first started to, when I first came here, I needed some way to make money, and the idea was to do an email business, not full internet, just email. But I still wanted a domain name for the email address. And so when I tried to register a .ai name, John Postal was the god of the internet back then. Um, Said that nobody was managing it, and did I want to run it? And I said, sure. And so I actually ran it. At the beginning, there was no charge, and only Anguillians could register names. And then at some point, like a year or two later, I felt, like this shouldn't be in my name. So I put it in the government's name. I made them the admin contact.
Mhm.
And then somebody came to the government and said that they should run it. And the government gave it to this company in Taiwan, which thought that they could sell a lot of names because I in Chinese means love. And then they didn't sell any names, didn't give the government hardly any money, and disappeared. Their company was struck from the books in Taiwan. They never answered emails or phone calls or anything. And so we got it back. And then I ran it after that. And for
So
money.
sorry to interrupt you. What year was that occurred? So you moved to Anguilla in 1994,
Yeah.
and then you started working with the .ai, or took over the .ai
It-
registry for a period of time, and then you lost it. So when did you lose it?
I don't really remember the numbers, but say 3 or 4 years in or something. And then it was gone for
Yeah.
maybe 5 years. And then we got it back. And then I started selling it to anybody, and for money, selling the domains for anybody. And it's been growing. Back then, when we started, it was around $5,000 a month, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 a month. And I used to print out the list of names, in a page or two, and give it to the government with a check, right? And it's just kept growing and growing and growing since then. And the way I would say it is, it's about like 10 doublings. We've gone from like 3,500 a month to 3.5 million a month, right? So there's like a factor of 1,000, and so it's
Hmm.
2 to the 10th is 1,024. So we've had like 10 doublings in like 15 years, something like that, right? So it's been growing, for a long time. But we had sort of two of those doublings in the last 2 years. Um, when ChatGPT
Yeah.
came out, it just shot up. Um, so yeah, it's just been doing well.
So let me ask you, when it came to losing it and then gaining it back, and then working with the government in general, obviously they knew when you were writing them checks that there is a value to this, and being an island nation with not a huge budget, that even if you were giving $500,000 a year or $100,000 a year to their cause, and having 4,000, 5,000 names, what did that mean to them? Like, did they start to notice, wait a minute, this is a real good moneymaker? Like, when did that happen? When they're saying this is a
Well,
big deal.
it's kind of like the frog in the boiling water. If it just keeps going up a little bit, a little bit, a little bit, nobody ever gets too excited because each month the check is just a little bit bigger than last month, right? And so you know,
Mhm.
and it didn't really. after ChatGPT came out, then some other people like Forbes or whatnot, people or Bloomberg came and interviewed me and put some articles out. And then those articles got shared around Facebook in Anguilla. And then everybody in Anguilla knew, right? But that's
Mhm.
just like last year. Before that, it was
Yeah, I was going to ask, are you
as
famous
of
on the
last year,
island?
there's people that now know who I am, right? And know what, that know the .ai is big
Yeah.
and stuff. But before then, people didn't really talk about it. People didn't know really who I was, that I was doing this.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So the people back at home listening, I'll give a little background here. So I worked at Uniregistry. Uniregistry was based in the Cayman Islands, and when I was working there, we provided a registrar, registry services and we had our own uh, GTLDs as well. And one of the things that we did in Cayman was manage .ky. And while I was there, one of the things that happened was, just like you said, was it went from being a free extension for locals to one that is sold anywhere or at whatever registrar will list it .ky. And then they started charging $20 a year or whatever it is, an affordable amount of money. But in it's called the Cayman Compass, in our local newspaper, people had very ruffled feathers, and they kind of positioned it like Frank Schilling, who's the owner of Uniregistry, has taken the internet away from the island. And then people were complaining that it isn't a local, Anguillan who's running it. Now, I know you have your citizenship, but are there people now saying, why aren't the islanders running this? Like,
So I'm
why don't
training
we
4
have this?
Anguillians to run this business, and my 4 sons, my four
Okay,
sons are all
so
born
that's
here, and it doesn't get, you can't do
yeah,
better than that, right? I'm training locals to run it, and so I
yeah.
don't, I don't get too much flack, and I'm really pretty local after 30 years. I mean,
Oh, you've certainly earned your stripes, and you've done a lot for the island. I mean, looking at the numbers, I read in one of the articles about .ai. Let me see here. Cassandra Cassidy at Morning Brew, she published an article that said that your revenue as of 2022 was 8.3 million, but as of 2023, you're expecting 30 million. Is that something that
yeah, I think
is of reality, or
no,
is
I
she
think that's
kind of just
about
pulling
right.
those names out of the air?
Yeah,
And then, well, that's pretty insane,
yeah,
lifting money. So I'm sure you've gotten the attention of
yeah.
the island government now, as being a pretty big moneymaker. And doing some additional research, their entire budget is just a little bit north of 100 million for the government, right?
Yeah, they. I think that it's 400 million EC, and then there's 2.688 EC to a dollar, so 100 and something. Yeah, yeah,
125 million. So you're now making up a third of the income of the government of the island.
roughly. Yeah, and we're
Yeah.
likely to double. I'm almost certain we will double in about a year because of
Okay.
this. Because we do these 2-year registrations,
Yep.
and we shot up a year ago. In another year, the renewals will shoot up, right?
Yeah. It's like
And
every other year, almost like pistons. Yeah,
yeah,
coming up and
and
down. But
so
yeah.
we're like January was 3.4 million US that we gave to the government, but almost all of that is new registrations, which it has, for the last year and whatever, it's almost all the money is new registrations. So once the renewals kick in, we'll be over 6 million a month. And
Wow.
yeah.
So you're going to have to print those lists of names on both sides of the paper.
So at some point we went to a, a PDF
An Excel?
to a PDF file and an
Yeah.
Excel spreadsheet. And then it got to the point where we couldn't make a PDF that was the size of all the names we had to do each month. We thought it said it ran out of memory, and so we got a computer with bigger memory, but it wasn't really the memory. It's like the that process just couldn't have that much memory or something, right? And so we couldn't. We ended up just doing Excel for the list of names.
Yeah, you think? Now, speaking of the government, some more. one of the things in Cayman was they didn't want outsiders to be able to register the names, with the idea that if a local Caymanian wanted to open a business in Cayman, they wanted them to get a good name, and they didn't want, investors and people to own them, so they'd have to pay thousands for a name. What's the attitude of like a local who wants to get jetski.ai or something like that to help a local business? Are there some that are held back for them, like registry reserved, or is it just kind of like
Well,
too bad?
they've outlawed jet skis in Anguilla,
Okay, so
so
that's
that one's
fun.
not a problem.
Bad example, but it's, like, vacation or
I have
whatever.
not. So the normal situation, really, because we had years where Anguillians could register them for
Mhm.
free, and then we had years where they weren't that famous. There's a lot of Anguillians that registered names, early on, like, shop.ai or news.ai or weather.ai, or, different things, right? Which later have become worth huge amounts of money,
Yeah,
right? So people are selling, bing.ai or campus.ai or, something for crazy
we
money.
just sold campus.ai.
And,
That's funny you mentioned that.
huh?
It's funny you mentioned campus.ai, because I think we just, as a brokerage, we just sold that.
Oh, you were involved with that? Okay.
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay. Well, I know the Anguillian that had it for years.
Okay,
Um,
well, small world.
yeah. So it's more. There's many people here who are getting this incredible bonus of selling some name for tens of thousands of dollars, um, which in many cases they weren't really using, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
most of the people are pretty happy with this situation, honestly.
Okay. Because like when I again, I'm like making the analogy back to Cayman, is when I lived there, there was the generation of people. So there was a woman named Jess that I worked with, and she was born and raised in Cayman, and she was telling me that there was a restaurant and bar that was a huge piece of land called the Palms, and it sold when I was there for like 40 million bucks or 45 million dollars. And she said that in the 1980s that her dad could have bought it for like 25,000, because in the 80s, um, the locals didn't think land on the beach was valuable, because you can't grow anything on it, and it just gets messed up when the storms come. So they always and that's why when you go to Cayman, you see graveyards on the beach, because that
Uh,
was the lower value land, right? So no one was wanting to buy the Palms for like 25,000 bucks, 30 grand with the liquor license and everything. It had a pool, like the works. And then it sells for this. And there was other pieces of land, like when I was there, that a lot of the older Canadians were then selling out and getting out. But then eventually, the locals are getting priced out of, all of the beachfront properties. So I'm sure, like right now it's good times, but I'm sure that, do you think that there will be people that are going to have an issue with it, or the amount of money that you're creating for the government
yeah.
on a yearly, monthly basis is probably providing some really amazing services you guys never would have had, right?
Right. So they've been able to get rid of property tax on residential buildings, right? So your house, you don't have to pay property tax anymore. That
Mm-hmm.
helps a huge portion of the population. And
Yeah.
if I'm right and it doubles again in the next year and keeps growing after that, they will probably, the wages tax is tiny compared to what we're going to increase in AI this year, right? The more websites there are using .ai, the more people see it, the more people think of using it, right? So it's sort of, the bigger it gets,
Mm-hmm.
the bigger it sort of advertises itself. And
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
so yeah, so I'm not planning to do any advertising, and we're growing at a really fast pace without any advertising. So doing what we're doing seems to be working, right?
It sure
Um,
is.
and
Absolutely.
and
Um,
the advertising that I was driving around California, and you could see signs on the side of the buildings with I forget which ones they were, but something .ai, right? So there's a freeway with 10,000 cars per hour going past this sign, which is something .ai, and you just know all these people are thinking about hey, we could use a .ai name, right? And
yeah.
and so the advertising that's just organically happening because people are using it is beyond what we could seriously do.
Yeah. And I agree with that. And I think with a lot of extensions, when people who are asking me what should we buy for our business, and they can choose between, you look at a smaller company, and then they're talking about registering like kind of an obscure GTLD. I always say to them, like, you have to make sure that you see it in the wild yourself. And I think if you're seeing that happening in California and you're seeing that happening in other places, then the general public are getting used to it. But if it's a very obscure extension, I think a lot of normal, especially if you're a B2C company, are going to put .com on the end of it. And you better register the .com as well to protect, your brand. And that's, a big part of that discussion. So I have some other questions about the .ai extension, and for people in general who are investing in it, whether it's their business or to build a business on it, or as a domain investor, is why do you have 2-year registrations anyway?
So
how did that come about?
It's a way to bring the money forward so we get it sooner without increasing the price.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Okay.
So we get more money up front. Thank you. But it's not changing the yearly rate. So,
okay.
And if we were to like change it back, it like would drop the amount of money we're getting this year substantially, right? So
okay. But next year you're relying on kind of like, if the growth is next year, you're going to get your 2 years then. So then the year after, you're getting the next 2 years, and go. Okay. So you believe that charging 2 years up front is making it so you can still provide a more reasonable price for your registrants and causing no price rate increases? Is that
it's a way of getting more money for the government today without changing the yearly price, right?
Got it.
And so, yeah.
Understood. Another question that I was actually thinking about is, why is it that you only auction off names once a month when they expire?
It's easier for the accounting to have, all these names are done. You have a certain amount of time to pay them. The payments are done, and we can record what happened, right? These names sold, these names were paid for, these names weren't paid for. Nobody bid on these names. And so we have a chunk of accounting that we can file away, right? If it was every day, it would be just too much record keeping.
You just don't have the bandwidth.
It's easier to just do once a month. Plus, for people, I don't want people to have to come every day. I mean, these people have other things they need to do besides bid on AI domains, right? We have sort of like 20 people that do, 80% of the buying, right? And I think it's better if those 20 people just come here. They essentially do all the bidding on the last day, right? And so essentially there's one day a month where, there's bidding going on. And I think it's better than to try to make them have to come every day or something silly that just, yeah.
All right. And then that leads me to the next question is, why do you only do it in one place? And is there an opportunity to offer it on other registrars
It
or
is
places too?
It is on other places. Other people, it is on other websites. I think it's Dynadot has it on theirs, and other people have been connecting in as well. So there will be more places. There's something in the FAQ, you can send email here if you want to connect your website to our auction. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'll link to that in the description. I'm sorry, I misunderstood that. Let me see. I have some other questions for you that I was thinking about that I wrote down here. Oh, here's one that, as a domain broker, is kind of a strange one for me. Is at one period of time you did have the updated date and the creation date in the WHOIS record, but then that mysteriously vanished one day, and I'm like, is there something wrong with this WHOIS? So I just started typing in other names, and it was gone from them as well. So why did that vanish?
So there's a couple of things. One is, if people stop paying, we want to auction off the name, right? But if it's getting down to the end and everybody can see that it's about to expire, then people contact them and buy it from that person, right? And then we don't get the money.
Okay. I got it. So you're doing it as you've realized the amount of revenue you're getting from these names and the expiry, and okay. I can see that. That makes sense. And then as for the WHOIS on the web on your website, like if I go to contact a registrant, it gives me an error. Do you know that there is an issue with the WHOIS through the through your own WHOIS
It's usually
website?
working. Is it not working at this moment?
No, AI names are actually relatively challenging at times to be able to contact the registrant because for some reason some registrars redact everything and don't
No,
even
but
let you
the WHOIS
contact the
works.
registrant.
The command line and the web page are working. What do you
I've been to it quite a few times and get an error when we put in the CAPTCHA letters and hit submit. It says there's an error.
Weird.
It's been like that for months.
I,
Yeah. I'll
I'll,
show you
okay.
after. I mean, maybe
I'm
it's
not.
just me, but other brokers that work for me complain, and another brokerage was complaining to me about it as well. Um, and then other registrars, I don't know if you feel like it's up to them to decide to do this, but you also they redact all of the information of a registrant and don't let you contact them. Is that something that is permitted, or is that more of a registrar decision? This is something I don't understand.
The
This is grounds I
registrars
don't
can
know.
do this, and some of them claim that for their privacy laws that it's better for them to do that, and we don't fight it too much. Yeah.
I got it. I mean, what ends up happening is the registrars that do that, usually when we contact them, they'll say something like, you will contact our client, but you need to pay us. It's usually a pretty extreme commission to get them to do the work. So it's like they're kind of
Wow.
wedging themselves in there and then charging, not just like, okay, well, we'll split it with you. It's not like that. It's usually a lot more than what even we're charging our client. It's usually a pretty extreme amount to do the work. So, and I think this is kind of potentially the direction in the name of security
Well,
and privacy that, this
so,
industry is kind of going, is people like me are taking away opportunities from registrars or from names expiring, and they don't want that to happen,
so people can put on their webpage how to contact them. So if they want to bypass everybody else and let people come straight to them, they
They
can.
sure can. But the WHOIS
Yeah.
should be, I think, whether it's protected or not, people should be able to contact someone through the WHOIS, right?
Yeah. So I kind of like the way it used to be, and that it was sort of a public registry, and you could see who owned everything, and that sort of there's some niceness to that.
Yeah.
But when the EU came out with their new rules about privacy, the people that do the software that we're using, the Coca software, believed that just giving out somebody's phone number from the registry or their email address from the registry was probably a violation of the new EU rules, right? And so then they had to make all these changes, and it's sort of annoying. I wish we could just say, look, you give us information which we're allowed to make public, and we make it public, and that's it. And but then again, like you say, a lot of the registers are now hiding the information anyway. So it's being hidden by them, and then we're hiding it, and it's like you can tell that a name is registered, but beyond that,
Well, I think the
not the
thing
same.
is that like maybe a registrar doesn't need to give you an email address, and they don't need to allow you to write free form messages. But GoDaddy offers like a drop down, so you would just say, "Hey, here's my email address, and here's a list of options. Choose one," and they'll send a message to the registrant saying, "Jeff Gabriel wants information on your domain name." And if you want to respond, that's fine. And it has a CAPTCHA, so it's like. So it makes it so some guy doesn't write a script and hammers everybody at GoDaddy 30 million times.
That's the other problem, is that spam has gotten worse and worse and worse over the
I
years,
agree.
right? 20 years ago, you didn't get tons of emails for people trying to buy your domain name, and now you do. And so it got to where it's annoying enough that that a lot of people don't want to list their email address on their domain name anymore.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
All right. Well, we could talk about this for days. I was reading on your website that it is, let's see. I believe it's section 13. I didn't write this part down, but talking about the UDRP and how people can use UDRP. So in cases where someone wants to take a domain from someone else, Anguilla uses the UDRP to file a UDRP challenge. You must use one of the ICANN approved dispute resolution service providers. But then at the bottom of there's a very long and boring paragraph writing about all of that, so I'm not going to read it. But at the very bottom, there's
Okay.
a sentence that says, as of January 1st, 2023, we do not accept UDRP challenges for domains where there's only 1, 2, or 3 characters before the AI, unless the complainant already has domains with those same few characters in at least 3 of the following 5 TLDs: com, .uk, .de, .jp, .fr. So a company, you've been out of the United States for a long time, but a company like CVS, do you know who they are?
Nope. So the problem is that a trademark has to be unique and special in some way.
Yep.
And 2 characters and probably 3 characters are just, if there's not some funny font or there's not some special colors or something, and it's supposed to be for a particular domain, right? And if what you have is a domain name, it's not for a particular field, it's not in a particular font, it's not particular colors. And so I don't believe that 3 characters, you can have many different people that have trademarks on the same 3 letters. Right?
Yeah,
Because they
absolutely.
use different designs, and they use different countries, and they use different whatever. It's even in the same country, you could have many with the same 3 letters.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, I don't want people to be coming to us with some little trademark they filed in some little country and getting this domain name that is really a big and attached to some other big company, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's how we decided to do it.
Okay. So a company like, let's say BMW owns the com,
Yeah,
but they don't have the JP.
they're going to have it.
Too bad.
They're going to have it in 3 of those domains, right? They already have 3 of those.
Yeah.
And so they're the one that should get the Anguilla one.
What about like QQ? You know who they are, right?
No, I don't.
QQ is the biggest messaging app in China.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right.
I guess
mean,
I
they
have
have
seen.
like
I've seen.
users, you know. So I'm saying that
Yeah.
they don't have any of those names in the extension, but it doesn't make sense for them to. But AI, it might make sense for them. And if someone puts a messaging app on the AI, I would think they have a right to come after it because it is an international product or service. But you know, I mean, I could sit here and dig for days and find examples.
Yeah.
But you also make a good argument on the flip side, where it's protecting domain owners from, you know, these situations. So I get it. Now, the other question is, from my understanding.
But like if QQ wants to get the .ai, they just get, you know, a couple of other ones first, and then they come to us, and everything's fine, right? and so it's not. Yeah.
I got it.
It was yeah.
So why .uk instead of .co.uk, where .co.uk is a little more widely known?
I don't know. The truth is, it's hardly ever a problem. The people don't come to us with just 3; they send us a list of 50.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, okay, you get it. You know, it's fine.
Okay, I understand.
It's not been close, right? They either have it or they just don't.
Yeah, and then the other question is that, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not. You know, I haven't read all the ICANN rules and UDRP rules and things like that. But to my understanding, it is that if I wanted to file a UDRP, I file it, you know, with WIPO, and then that it begins where I'm saying that somebody is squatting on my name and for the following reasons, or I pay a lawyer to do that. And usually the registry isn't involved in that in the slightest. So by using the first, UDRP, you skip that rule altogether and just
the first email that WIPO sends is they ask, does UDRP apply to this domain, right?
Oh, okay.
That's the first question they ask. It's like, not that one.
All right, so you decline. You can say no, it doesn't, and that's the end of it. Okay,
that's the end of it.
That's life. Okay, well that answers that. And then another one that's really it's like a similar situation is You have the grounds for suspending or revoking a domain, and it talks about things like anything that would be illegal in Anguilla, porn that would be
Anguilla.
illegal. Anguilla, I'm sorry.
Anguilla.
Slap me in the head. Violating copyrights, hate speech, fun stuff like that. And then looking at different things, because in the Cayman Islands, for example, you weren't allowed to drink past 12 o'clock at night on a Saturday, and you couldn't offend the rights of a woman, and say mean things to her or talk negatively of, God himself or things like that. So I looked into some of the laws, and in your country, it says any person who uses any indecent, abusive, blasphemous, insulting, threatening language in any place to the annoyance of the public is against the law. So if someone has like BibleBurning.ai, and that wouldn't be okay in your country, would that lead to grounds for removal of the name, or is it kind of like a case by case?
We have not had this test case come up, and I'm not sure what would happen next. And some of this, yeah.
I think like for example, I understood that the story of ICANN was only created because the U.S. government used to manage .com. And what happened is in different treaties and situations.
It wasn't the U.S. government. It's John Postal. There was
John
one guy,
Postal.
and he
I'm
died.
sorry.
He died. Something had to happen, right?
Okay.
So they replaced him with this huge institution.
I was told that people were including, like in different treaties and things like that, limitations on .com and different parts of the internet in countries that didn't like different things. And people were trying to limit it. And so they tried to create a nonprofit organization that protected everyone from, different views. So like in a Muslim country, they might block all the adult related content, and that might be illegal there, and maybe are firearms illegal in your country, or like in Cayman they were?
You have to get a permit, which is hard to get.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's no reason to have one there in reality. But, I think so you haven't had a situation where you've taken a name where it's kind of like more of a social issue or something like that?
I wouldn't say we've had anything that was particular like that, like, Bible burning, offending locals with that kind of thing. No.
Okay. I got it. And I've been looking around in the background there and in my amazing office as well, which is, if I turn the camera, would probably look very similar to yours. Is this where .ai happens?
Yeah.
Is this the world headquarters of AI?
Let's see. That machine right there is the main one.
Which one? The little black?
Yeah.
Oh wow, that's it. Everything is on there.
Yep.
And what do you have for a backup in case you guys get hit by a hurricane?
There's lots of other backups, and then there's offsite backups, and there's there's backups on top of backups. There's backups into safes. There's backups, offline backups, offsite backup. All this stuff.
Do you, when there is a large hurricane coming, is it up to you, like you need to leave the island to be prepared, or you kind of wait it out and hope and see what happens?
So the worst that happens is that there's a period where you can't register new names, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the names keep working. And then what happens is all the companies, Namecheap or whatever, they save up the names that people wanted to register. And as soon as we're back, they're all registered, right?
Oh, okay.
So
that makes sense.
It's weird, but we could be offline for a few days and it's not the end of the world. But it's really only happened once. And it was only for a couple of days. So, but we're building a new office right now. They're putting up blocks and stuff. And this will be extremely hurricane resistant and have oodles of power and, backup Starlinks and all that kind of stuff. So we should be pretty well okay in the next hurricane.
And tell me more about financial cryptography. I'm actually, I got into crypto in I'd say 2013. So obviously I was 20 years late from when you got in. And you're talking about the cypherpunks and the history of it. Can you give me a brief from someone like you who's been involved. Everyone I've talked to got in around the similar time or a couple years before me. But tell me what it was like back then. I've never met anyone like you before.
Okay. So once you understand public key, cryptography and digital signatures in particular, you realize that there's going to be ways for computers to process payments, because somebody can now use a digital signature to authorize something, and then a computer can process it, and the computers are going to be able to process it much faster. There's going to be less chance of, there's no chance of fraud on a digital signature, whereas any other financial system payment, there's chances of fraud, right? And the cost,
Yeah.
I mean, if you compare the cost of credit cards at 3.5%, or wire transfers at $100, or whatever, it's clear that it should be the case that a computer could process a payment much cheaper, right? Anyway,
Yeah.
we could see this, 35 years ago, that computers should be processing cryptographically signed payments somehow. It was just a question of how, right? What's the, how do you want to structure this? How does the system set up? What does the software, what's the user experience? What institutions are in the middle of it, or whatever. So that was all, we had to figure that out. But it was clear that in the future, we wouldn't be doing financial payments the same way that we were since the invention of the telegraph, right? The wire transfer is really from when they invented the telegraph wire. They could send a message, right? And it's still called a wire transfer from way back then. And it hasn't really changed much, right? There's a message going to another bank, and an account at that bank is being debited from, an account, this, that kind of, I mean, it's the same technology, really, from, 200 years or whatever. I mean, it's a long time, whatever the telegraph was. So it's, we could see something would come along, and we wanted to be part of it. We wanted to try to write the software to do that.
Okay. So I have two questions off of what you just said. So during that similar time in the 90s, we had Elon Musk and PayPal coming out. And obviously they were able to do international payments. I don't know in the 90s, but I know that I had PayPal back then. So that was something similar that got to the market quite quickly.
No, to me, there's no digital signature, no cryptography. I mean, and that PayPal was cool, and it's nice, but it's not what we were thinking about, right?
Okay. And then where did that lead to, really, like crypto and what you have on your shirt, like the crypto that we know today? How did it get there from what you were thinking about?
Yeah, so some of the stuff that people were doing back then came into Bitcoin. Like they had these remailers, and they used to do this sort of proof of work to make these little, like stamps for doing the remailing. And that sort of idea of the proof of work came into Bitcoin, right? And so I think a lot of the worldview that we had back in Cypherpunks has now come to pass. And it's kind of fun.
Yeah. I mean, I was thinking about when you were just talking about it, that, the progression of exchanging money in it. And I was at the grocery store a week ago, and an older woman was writing a check for her groceries. I'm like, oh my God, look at this. Like I haven't seen anybody do that in a really long time. And I have a checkbook for my business. I think I use it once a year, when someone's like, I'll take a check, and they're, whatever, some random situation. But yeah, I mean, I think Bitcoin is obviously the wave of the future. It's instant, it's easy, it's pretty simple, and it makes sense. So when you were in financial cryptography, before the call, we talked about, and you brought up in the very beginning, is, you doing the same work outside of the country technically can make you an arms dealer. Can you tell people the story about what you did and what it led to? I mean, I thought it might lead to your arrest, because technically you're a felon at that. So why don't you tell us this? I think it's a great story, and I was laughing when I was reading about it in your bio.
The International Traffic in Arms Regulations covered cryptography. And if you had software that did cryptography and you exported it out of the United States, that was the same thing as if you were an arms dealer. You'd violated the ITAR. And so in Anguilla, I made a web page where the default text was like a 3-line RSA encryption program. And if you just hit submit on this web form with that default text, it would go from your browser, say in the United States, to my computer here in Anguilla, right? Which means that you have exported some software that does encryption, therefore qualifying you as an international arms trafficker. Right? And so I put up this webpage, and everybody that went to it, they could be an anonymous arms trafficker and not put in their name, or they could put down their name and be an officially registered arms trafficker, right? And so they had something crazy like 20,000 people, and this is back in like 97 or 96 or a long time ago, where there weren't quite so many people on the internet, and so we had some crazy number of people that became official international arms traffickers by doing this. And it's this sort of civil disobedience and making fun of the law, right? And that's sometimes necessary to get a law changed. And it got enough notoriety that it was actually on a CNN program where they talked about this, and the law changed soon after that. So it might have had an impact.
I'm sure it did. I mean, I think it probably helped, and I'm sure that you weren't the only one probably talking about it, but it created the discussion and made it relevant, but like there's other sayings, like there's weird laws in the United States. I think I remember there was one that you couldn't beat your wife with a stick no bigger than your hand, I was reading about. And then there's one that's like you can't hit your wife with a stick thicker than your thumb. That's where like the rule of thumb comes from, but some of these laws were actually like still in existence up until like, the 80s or the 70s. But obviously it only comes to light when some crafty lawyer says, well, my client used a stick no bigger than his hand. And they're like, oh God, that's, it kind of comes out. But it's also could probably become dangerous, because if what you were working on actually got momentum and was getting a lot of, publicity, that you could become, an extraditable person.
I was no longer a U.S. citizen, right? Problem. So they sort of don't have any claim on me. But the fun part was that Americans sitting inside these crazy laws could just click a button, and officially they've now violated the international traffic in arms regulations. But they're not going to go arrest these 20,000 people for clicking a button on a web page, right? It's not going to happen. And so it's a way of it's civil disobedience. It's a way to break the law publicly and not seriously enough that they could actually justify arresting you.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is a normal day at the .ai registry for a guy like you? Not at the end of the month, not when the auctions are going on, but a normal day like today.
In the morning we come in and there's a few emails and we have to deal with a few problems that somebody has. And most of the time it's, we actually do several other businesses here just at the same time. So we have a cash for gold business.
Oh, really?
We have a Bitcoin ATM here. And so people are coming to use the Bitcoin ATM. We also do DNA testing to see who's the daddy. So, and we're working on several other projects, in the background. The last month we've been trying to simulate electrons in a wire. So we bought a computer that has an RTX A6000, which is a 10,000 core, 48 gigabyte GPU, right? So it's a pretty beefy GPU to run some of these AI models. We've been playing a lot of AI models just because it's fun, right? But once we had this computer, which is apparently about as fast as the fastest computer in the world like 21 years ago, as far as flops.
Okay.
Like, gosh, we should do something. We should try to simulate something, right? And so, do you know Veritasium, the YouTube guy? He's worth following. But he did something about how electricity propagates in a wire, which I think he got it wrong. But it would be fun to be able to simulate how the electrons propagate in the wire, right? And to be able to, very clearly demonstrate what happens. And with this GPU, we can calculate for thousands of electrons, what's happening, right? And so we've been playing with that. But we're always
What have you found so
well.
far?
So the
What have you
first thing
found
is
with it?
they talk about a drift speed and how the drift speed is very slow for electrons, like less than a millimeter per second. But what they're missing is that's the average speed of a bunch of electrons which are going in different directions, right? The individual electrons can actually be moving quite fast, and they completely miss that in all the explanations.
Uh-huh.
There's a bunch of people that have tried to rebut Veritasium because he's wrong, and somebody's got to get it cleared up because you can't let something be wrong on the internet, right? And
Of course not.
so.
Yeah.
But in all of their cases, they still accept the fact that electricity doesn't move. The electrons don't move fast, so they can't be what's propagating the electricity because the electrical signal goes nearly the speed of light, right? But it's wrong because the actual electrons may be going like a tenth or 1% of the speed of light just on each one of them, okay? The other thing that's weird is that the electrons, like if you look at sound, the atoms are just pushing on the one next to them. But in electrons, an electron could be, if you have like a wall of electrons, they're not just pushing on the electrons right next to them. Their field goes through many, many electrons deep. And so they're pushing far ahead of where they are. Okay? And so the wave can travel much faster than the electrons themselves are traveling. And the electrons can travel much faster than people think. And so actually, it's not that bizarre that the electrons can carry a signal at the speed of light. But we need to get, I want it to be a nice simulation that everybody can see all the little parts of it and all that kind of stuff. Yeah.
I'd love to see that. So let me ask you this. I mean, if I went out and bought that computer, brought it to my house, and I just casually say, I'm going to do a simulation that you just mentioned, I mean, how do you even begin to do that? I mean, I'm sitting here thinking to myself while you're explaining it, like, how do you even begin? How do you even begin to do that? I don't
Okay.
even get it.
So this is the other fun thing, right? I had never written any code to run on a GPU a month
Uh-huh.
ago. Never. I don't know how to write, code for a GPU, right? But I have 3 AIs on 3 different tabs up above the browser here, right?
Mhm.
We've got, Google and ChatGPT and Claude.ai. And if you ask each of them some interesting question like, what's the easiest way to write code for a GPU?
Yeah.
you could usually get an answer that's probably pretty good, right? And then if you say, okay, write some code to do this, they like do, right? And you just try it out. And I really basically wrote the code with the help of these 3 different AIs. Um, and it's not quite there yet. And I may have to really learn more
Yeah.
to get it to all be right. But we've been doing lots of different simulations and lots of different visualizations. And, at times, we're having waves propagate we could get to like 2% the speed of light so far.
When are you going to build a collider
So
underneath the island? Is that the next step?
no.
I remember when, so we spoke, the last time we spoke was 4 years ago, pretty much in December. It was 4 years in December was the last time we spoke. And when I spoke to you, you said you were flying RC planes with your boys and RC boats and things like that. And then this time I talked to you, now you guys are doing this. So I'm interested to hear what you're going to be doing 4 years ago in the mad scientist lab, where you guys are.
We'll see. It's pretty wild, right? Because we have sort of the ability to buy whatever toy we could possibly want to play with.
Yeah.
And and we have 4 boys that need to learn stuff and have time on their hands. So I don't know what we'll be doing.
Well, hopefully keep building off of this. I mean, if you get up to what is the closest we've gotten to the speed of light in a normal, science setting? I don't think we've gotten to the speed of light. We've gotten very close in the collider. Isn't that right?
No. I'm talking. So I'm trying to simulate electricity in a
Yeah.
wire. Just this is like a very fundamental thing. We've been playing with electricity for a long time. People ought to understand how electricity propagates down a
Yeah.
wire, right? And in fact, they have like telegraphers' equations from 100 years ago. They sort of understood how electricity propagated down a telegraph line. But at a low level, what do the electrons do,
Yeah.
right? And there's not. I mean, I got a degree in electrical engineering, and I've wondered about this question for 40 years. Very few people have anything really as to how the electrons are moving and
It's
why.
just like, hey, it works. It's
Okay.
fine. Don't worry about it. And
Hey, it
the answer.
works. We've got a high level equation. This gets us the right answer,
Yeah.
right? And like, I want to understand at the low level, how does this electron do what it's doing and why, and what's the thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't find anything that really does it at the electron level. And we have a computer that's big enough to simulate, lots of electrons at a reasonable speed for a tiny piece of wire, right?
Do you think any of our
Um,
listeners might have that answer for you or give you some tips? Do you think there's any odds?
maybe, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's see what they say. You'd be surprised. Um,
Yeah.
all right. Well, is there anything you else would like to tell our viewers about the .ai registry, or anything else that you're working on, or tell us any use cases that you've seen of any of the domains that you find that are really exciting or interesting to look at?
No, I don't know. It looks to me like it's going to keep growing and keep getting bigger. And um, I hope that Anguilla can keep reducing their tax burden on the local population. And thank you all for buying domain names.
Yeah, I mean, but it's an awesome story. I think
It is. It's amazing.
it's an awesome story, and I think it's great that what you've been able to do has helped. It's helping push innovation, right, which you love, and also
Yeah.
is helping the 14,000 people of an island nation move forward into the future as well, and get the things that they need to survive, which is great as well. So,
Yeah.
I can't really think of a better outcome for everybody
Yeah.
in business.
If you look at even countries like some of the Arab countries where they get a lot of money from oil, they still
Uh-huh.
have a bunch of taxes, right? So we could be the first country, 5 years or 10 years from now, that's completely funded without taxes. And that to me is just like amazing, right? As a libertarian, that would be like a dream come true if we had a country that didn't need to have taxes. And
Yeah, and
Anguilla might be the first one there.
yeah, I agree. And I don't mind paying tax. I
Yeah.
feel that the amount that I have to pay is debilitating and life-changing, and I don't
Yeah.
think the amount of money I'm paying in is giving me the value of what I'm putting in. And I'm fine if I want to go buy a luxury car and I got to pay a 30% tax on it. Fine. I mean, that's okay. But when I'm paying in tax more than I'm actually saving a year, I mean, that's a lot,
Yep.
and then if I drive down my road and there's a giant pothole and I call the city and tell them to fix it, they just say, too bad. So it just isn't. I don't know. I just don't see the value. But we could have an entire other episode
Yeah.
talking about that. But great. I really appreciate you doing this, especially on short notice. I really, and thank you for your time. I know you're a busy man. You got a lot of great things going on there.